In this training, we're going to review how to keep the violation emails out of your inbox. So this may be a familiar sight. You receive a violation email, and you're wondering what went wrong. Well, today we're going to go over the top violated rules and how to avoid them. But first, I want to stress that it's important that all members of CCI MLS take the time to read the MLS rules and regulations and MLS citation policy. The MLS rules and regulations do include an appendix of best practices, definitions, and all the CCI MLS policies. I also have a QR code on the screen that will bring you to our website. If you have any questions about any information within these documents, please feel free to reach out to us. We can help clarify those questions. So the top violated rules we're going to be going over today and how to avoid them are use of public remarks, failure to update the status of a listing, failure to upload signed change documentation, failure to abide by the photo policy, failure to input accurate listing information, and failure to input a required listing. So the first one is use of public remarks in media. So what can be entered into the public remarks? So information in the public remarks shall only relate to the description and condition of the property and may include buyer incentives from the seller. If buyer incentives are being offered from the seller, this information may only be entered into the public remarks. So it can't go in any other section. What cannot be entered into the public remarks or media? So this is a list of what can't be entered. It would be any open house information, showing instructions, which includes showing start dates, who to call for showings, etc. Any offer details of or deadlines, any web addresses or URLs, any agent or office branding that would be, for example, agent or company name, phone numbers, emails, etc. The property occupancy details, as that can be a safety concern if you were to say vacant, for example. Information intended for real estate agents or brokers, including compensation or bonuses, which cannot be entered in any remarks. So compensation is not allowed in Cape Cod and Islands MLS. And to touch on some of these other ones, open house does have its own section, so you can put your open house information into the open house section. Same with showing instructions, has its own remarks field. Offer details or deadlines should be going into the private remarks. Same with web addresses, same with any agent or office branding. If you feel necessary, even though it is on your listing as you being the listing agent and your office being the listing office. All right, so we're moving on from public remarks and we're going to be talking about failure to update the status of a listing. So you have 24 hours to update the status of your listings after obtaining a fully executed offer to either active with kickout, pending, continue to show, or pending. Now, properties that have closed should be updated within 72 hours of the closing. So this is really because data is important, and it's important to have accurate data as well to reflect the accuracy of the property. Kind of touching on that, we're going to talk about some statuses. So the first being active with kickout, you should this status should be used if the property has an accepted offer with a kickout clause. This should be noted as either home sale contingency, probate, or third-party approval. Whereas pending continue to show should be used if the property has an accepted offer with no kickout, but the seller and agent would like to continue to show the property. And lastly, pending's very similar to that. It should be used if the property has an accepted offer with no kickout, but the seller and agent have decided to no longer show the property. Next, we're moving on to failure to upload change documentation. So when do I need to submit change documentation? Agents must upload the seller's written authorization to properties that have been updated to either the temp off market or canceled status, or the expiration date has been extended within 24 hours of the change in the MLS. So just important to note, the change documentation we do require are temp off market, cancellations, and extensions. You should not be making any changes to your listing until you have the seller's written authorization to make those changes. And when we say written authorization, that can be in the form of a change form, an email, or text, just something that shows the seller's authorizing you in writing to make that change. And as a best practice, it is recommended that you upload the seller's authorization prior to making the change. This way you won't forget. Agents can upload the cancellation documentation prior to the status change, as once it's canceled, you're no longer able to edit the listing, which includes uploading any documents. If you do forget to upload it before it's canceled, just email it to us and we can upload it for you. In order to change the status of a listing to canceled, your broker or full rights office manager or admin must make this change in the system for you or give the MLS office permission to make that status change. Now, as for any extensions, temp off market, or cancellations, if you're on the go, and we know you are, instead of uploading it yourself, feel free to send a copy to MLS support at cciaor.com, and we'll be happy to upload that for you. Next, we're moving on to failure to abide by the photo policy. So a full description of the photo policy can be found within the MLS rules and regulations. But the most common violations of the photo policy include branded photos or virtual media. So that would be like you're including your agent, your name, your broker's name, phone numbers, emails, etc. Next would be failure to include a required exterior front-facing photo. So for residential properties, you are required to have a front-facing exterior photo of the property. This does not have to be the primary image. It just has to be within your photo gallery. The next would be use of photographs without written permission from the owner of the photographs. Now, that one's pretty important. It's important to know if you did not take the photos yourself or you did not license the photos yourself, that you know where the photos came from and who the owner is to get permission to use those photos. Sometimes owners may send you photos and they may think they're the owner, but it could belong to someone else. So it's important to check on that and get permission from those who own the photos. Lastly, pretty newer rule is using an area photo as the primary image. So area photo is anything that's not of or from the property. So you can have area photos within your photo gallery. They just can't be the primary image of the property. The primary image must be inclusive of the property or a view from the property. Next, we have failure to input accurate listing information. Information added to a listing must be accurate, and this includes, but is not limited to, some of the top ones we see, which are directions to the property. That means not putting just GPS or the address of the listing. You should be putting some simple directions to the property, and this is especially helpful if the property is hard to find. The next is the owner name. You can't say owner of record. It has to be the accurate owner name of the property. I do like to point out that that is a private field, which means that it remains only within the MLS. So it's not getting distributed to websites, even though it is public record, so people are able to look up who is the owner of the property. But just know it's not coming from the MLS and being distributed to those websites. The next is the listing type, so make sure to choose the correct, whether it's exclusive right to sell or exclusive agency or exclusive right to lease or exclusive, etc. So just make sure you're selecting the correct listing type. The next is bedrooms and bathrooms. When you add a listing, you do populate tax data populate information from the field card. Bedrooms and bathrooms are pulled in. If you know that those aren't accurate numbers, you can update them. Just make sure you're updating them to accurate information of the property, the correct number of bedrooms and bathrooms of the property. Square footage fields are also pulled directly from the field card. That's that field card square footage field, which can't be edited. If you have additional finished space, you would add that to the additional finished space field. And the field card square footage and additional finished space added together will be the total finished space of the property. And lastly, we have map location. So when you're moving on from the address tab to the main fields tab of adding a listing, you're required to note where the location of the property is with a red pushpin. If that pushpin's not in the correct spot, you can either drag that pushpin or drag the map to the correct location. But again, important as people will look at that for also in accompanying the directions. So just make sure it's in the right spot. As I had mentioned on the last slide, agents must use the populate tax data option when entering a listing into the MLS. By doing so, we can ensure the accuracy of the mapping, and it will automatically add records into your input form. In addition, it will also connect property history. So a little trick is add the street number, street name, county, and town, and then click on this populate tax data, and it should fill in this other information for you, as well as some fields on the main fields tab. Next, we have failure to input a required listing. First, I want to say, what is the CCI MLS mandatory listing area? That is Barnstable County, Dukes County, Nantucket County, and the town of Wareham. So that means if you take a listing in one of those areas on an exclusive listing agreement basis, it is required to be entered into Cape Cod and Islands MLS within 1 business day of publicly marketing the property. Um, and that's only for residential land and multifamily listings. And I do want to point out that participants are required to input all residential land and multifamily listings within the mandatory listing area as well. So going off of that, what is the clear cooperation policy? Well, within 1 business day of marketing a property to the public, the listing broker must submit a listing in the mandatory listing area to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants. And when we say public marketing, what is considered public marketing? Public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing on public-facing websites, brokerage website displays, digital communications marketing or email blasts, multi-brokerage, listing share networks, and applications available to the general public. Guidance on public marketing can be found on our website. Simply search Clear Cooperation, and the website is ccIAOR.com. All right, and I think we're getting to the end of our slides here. I just want to point out that if you do find an error on a listing, let us know. When you're viewing the listing, you can simply press the report error button at the top right, and you'll send us a note. When you use that report error button, all error submissions are anonymous, and when you submit that error, you should not expect a follow-up. However, staff may reach out to you if more information is needed. Also, you could also reach out directly to the listing agent if you just notice maybe a spelling mistake or something. We're all here to help each other, so feel free to reach out. But if you want us to reach out, definitely hit that report error and we'll follow up with it. Thank you so much for joining today. Should you have any additional questions on the rules and regulations, citation policy, or anything covered in this training, feel free to reach out to MLS support. We can be reached at mlssupport@ccIAOR.com, or you can utilize that chat functionality within the help section of Flex MLS. Thank you so much for joining.